I caught the bug. I just caught the bug. I think it was looking at Irving Penn, Richard Avedon, and Dian Arbus. That's what did it for me. I just kind of wanted to kind of dissect and pick apart and understand why these pictures stayed with me and kind of completely like tattooed onto my memory.
Welcome to the channel. My name is Warren Shepherd and I'm a portrait photographer based in Toronto. Today's video is going to be very different. Normally I will talk about various aspects of portrait photography, but today I have a very special guest. Harry Borden is one of the most accomplished portrait photographers working today. With a career spanning decades and an eye for capturing compelling human stories, Harry has photographed some of the most influential figures in politics, entertainment, music and culture. His subjects range from Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, to Robin Williams and Martin Scorsese, to Paul McCartney and the Spice Girls, and countless others in between whose stories have shaped our world. He's won 2 World Press Awards and his portraits grace the pages of The Observer, The New Yorker, Vogue, and many more. Over 100 of his prints are held in the National Portrait Gallery in London. But that's enough flattery. Let's talk in depth with Harry, not just about his technical prowess, but about his personal connection to his chosen profession. So let's meet the man, the myth, the legend, Harry Borden.
Thank you so much, Harry, for joining me. I know you're a busy man. I know this is like, it's very surreal. It's like meeting a celebrity. You're the closest celebrity I've met.
Oh, that. Well, given the current situation with the Epstein Files, the word celebrity sort of doesn't have the currency that it once did.
No, and it's so funny because just yesterday I saw a story about Fergie, and I know you did that video on your shoot with her where you referred to her as a prostitute.
Well,
And
it was purely an aesthetic thing,
no,
really.
I understand. In the context of the shoot, it made sense. But then looking at it in light of all this stuff that they've uncovered with these emails, it's like,
it's crazy.
It takes on a whole new turn.
Fred and I just recorded a video yesterday whereby he wanted to ask me talk about 5 people that I photographed who are in the Epstein Files, and it's more difficult thinking of people who aren't, because, as I said, it's sort of a devalued currency, celebrity now, because of, I mean, the takeaway, that the sort of sad thing that I found, and I feel strongly, is that quite often, because I've sort of photographed people over 30 years, and I guess been sort of on the periphery or close to people with genuine sort of power, you know, like Madeleine Albright or Baroness Thatcher or whoever, Condoleezza Rice or people like that. I'm thinking of American people that people in America or Canada would know. But I kind of take issue with the kind of narrative that the conspiracy theorists have, that there is this kind of tight-knit cabal of people that are running everything. And it seems to me that the world is much more complex, and it's a bit like trying to predict the weather, you know, and it wouldn't, if there was some kind of conspiracy going on, you know, then somebody with a big mouth would kind of let the side down and sort of reveal that it's all kind of chaotic. And it's just a lot of individuals, to my mind, who crave status and so on. But the thing about the Epstein Files is that it gives people the impression that it is a conspiracy and there is this kind of elite.
Because they're all lumped into one sort of area.
They are.
But I think the problem with celebrity these days is that back in the golden age, you would put them up on a pedestal and you wouldn't know anything about them except what their publicists put out, their managers put out. That was very carefully constructed. Now, they're human beings. They put themselves out on social media. You learn so much more about them, more than you probably wanted to know. It brings them down to the level of the common person. Sometimes you think, yeah, I don't think I want to know that about you. I'd rather look
I,
at
th-
you up on the
I
pedestal.
actually, I think that's true, but it also isn't true because if I'd been working, at the time of, Eve Arnold or really great photographers who documented, say, for instance, Marilyn Monroe, um, back then the publicists didn't have so much control, and so Annie Leibovitz famously would move in with some of her subjects when she was
Mm.
photographing them in the 1970s for Rolling Stone magazine. So it's kind of more controlled, but at the same time more crazy and chaotic with social media.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the young celebrities that sort of uh, they're in a production, they're in a movie, and they
Mm,
tank it by the things they say, and you just think, why is your publicist not controlling you more?
yeah. Well,
Because well, there's
I
millions
mean,
of dollars invested in
yeah,
you.
I mean, I think alongside having in terms of coming at it from the photography and portraits, alongside having a good eye and understanding the medium and so on. Sadly, one of the things that has helped me attain some degree of modest success, over the last 30 years, is that I can work really quickly. So I'm really jealous of how it was back in the 70s. The first time I was on a plane with a journalist going to America, and I was born in New York. My dad was an American.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know you were
so
born in New York. I knew your dad was American, but I didn't know you were born in
Yeah,
New York.
yeah, I've got an American passport and everything. I
Okay.
mean, I basically was really excited because last time I'd been in America, I was a baby, and then as you can tell from my accent, I grew up in the UK, and so I was returning to my homeland as I saw it, and the enemy were paying for everything, and we were getting to stay in a hotel and photograph a band in San Francisco. I remember saying to the journalist, "This is amazing, that we're doing this." And, it wasn't, as another photographer called Tom Stoddart, who's no longer with us, used to say, it's a champagne lifestyle on a beer salary. But
Right.
basically, I was sort of really excited. I was about 20, and the journalist had said to me, "You should have been here 10, 20 years before because you'd get to your hotel room and there would be bowls of cocaine and all manner of debauchery would be waiting for you. Back when it was Queen and David Bowie in the 70s. Because I really started at the end of the 80s, and so it was much more loose and chaotic, and so the pictures. I just think it's a celebrity. People are obsessed with celebrity. The world is small now because of sort of this digital paradigm shift. So images can be disseminated around the world in a much more effective way. So what it means is that the PRs have centralized and controlled the production of imagery. So if I wanted to be more successful, I should have really moved to Los Angeles and set myself up as a guy that does movie posters and worked in that kind of very tiny ecosystem, because now they only need to do one shoot and then these pictures are syndicated around the world. I had a brief period when I started where, because the internet hadn't yet happened,
Hmm.
where they had to get when they were touring and promoting a film, they'd have to get, Martin Scorsese or whoever it happens to be to do a shoot in London for the London press, and then Paris for the French press, and
Hmm.
so and Berlin for Germany, and so on. And
But
so
now they
lots of
just do
photographers.
one shoot.
Yeah, that's right. And so, or if they do shoots in the UK, they'll only do maybe one or two with very prestigious magazines that will assert themselves and ensure that they get their own exclusive shoot.
Okay, so now you've covered a lot of ground in your career, and when I was preparing for this, I thought, okay, yes, you're a portrait photographer, you've got an editorial style, you've shot celebrities. On your Instagram, you call yourself, or you refer to yourself as an artist. So, how do you classify yourself? Do you even want to? Do you like those labels?
Um, I don't shy away from the term artist. My brother and sister are both painters,
Right.
and it really comes from sort of seeing what they do and the way that they apply themselves and their motivation, uh, and realizing that it's not too dissimilar to how I've evolved. I definitely don't think I was an artist at the beginning, because my main concern was making a living from taking photographs. But as I've got older and more longer in the tooth, I sort of like the idea of deriving intrinsic pleasure from just enjoying the whole process of taking images. And I've also made a concerted effort to do projects that I feel I care about. So my mantra is, how do I feel about a subject and what am I trying to say? And I have to sort of feel I have skin in the game.
Okay, we will get into that. And before we go on, this isn't going to be very technical. I know you're very technically proficient. I know a lot of people want to know, oh, what does he use? What camera does he use? What does he? Yes, anyone can learn the technical aspects of photography. I am living proof of that. But I want to go into the man behind the lens, so to speak. And if I ask anything you don't feel comfortable asking, just let me know. Maybe we should have a safe word.
I don't have appropriate boundaries. I'm an open book, really. So you can
Okay.
literally
No.
ask me anything. I'm
Okay.
not embarrassable.
Oh, you shouldn't have opened that door. But I want to start. I mean, every hero needs an origin story. I want to go back to your beginning, before your first big shoot, before your time at Plymouth College. And I want to know how someone who grew up on a pig farm could develop a passion for photography. You must have had some very photogenic sows to inspire you. And also, now you mentioned your siblings are also artistic. So where did that come from? I'm guessing, a very rural environment, how do you develop that sort of creative
Yeah,
passion?
I think it's the culture of your familial upbringing. So my parents were very unusual in the sense that, especially my dad was
An
the
art
product.
director, yes.
He was an art director in Madison Avenue, so he was like Don Draper. He was one of those guys. He didn't really like Mad Men, but I think I learned a lot about what kind of a person he was from watching that. I mean, a lot of
Did he
those
not
guys
like,
came.
sorry, did he not like it
He
because it was too accurate, or it was not accurate?
I think it triggered him. Maybe, yeah. He was very contrary, very opinionated. He just sort of would take against things. Maybe he didn't think it was accurate, but I think it was pretty accurate. A lot of those guys, they came out of the forces after the war, and they were a bit crazy, and they created it's completely interwoven into the sort of fabric of America and capitalism and the ideas behind America and the sort of narratives, and it's sort of enthralled to the marketplace, and how people will kind of respond emotionally to buying things. And so my dad so first he lied about his age, and he joined the American Marines, and he was in the Marines briefly because he wanted to fight Hitler. He just missed active service. And then he went into advertising as an art director. His dad was from Ukraine, and his mother was from Romania. And they came to America for a better life, to escape pogroms, in Eastern Europe. And they built their own house in upstate New York. But his father sadly died. I never met him. He was called Harry, and he was a draftsman. So I guess it was kind of a creative, slightly cultured background. But having said that, they were quite macho as well. So, my dad's father's brother was a guy called Eddie Borden, and he had 3 world champions. He was a fight promoter, and he was a writer and a boxer. And a lot of Jewish people were into boxing in the 1930s, and they were into that, and they were big athletic guys. And my dad sort of was a very macho sort of guy, and so he worked in advertising. He had a son. He married someone after having known them for a month on Valentine's Day. I think he probably wanted to be like his parents, who'd married on Valentine's Day, very, very spontaneously, and on the it's kind of very romantic. And it almost immediately didn't work. So I had a half brother that I never met in America, they split up, and then I think my dad met my mother, and my mother was very, very different. My mother is half Irish, but kind of posh English, and they were a very odd couple, really. But successful married. They were married the whole time. They never split up or anything, and they had me in New York. My dad was there by this stage working in advertising, and my mum was a chef, and she worked with Robert Carré, who was a famous chef back then. He had a book, a program called Carrier's Kitchen. He was one of the first TV chefs, and my parents basically lived in New York for about a year or so, and then they came to London, where my dad was asked to join an agency, an advertising agency. He was the head art director, and I think he had a midlife crisis. He sort of suddenly became very concerned with he had a young family, and I think he wanted certainty, and he decided he wanted to go farming, and bizarrely he bought a pig farm in Devon. So he used to joke
about farming.
Well, they made a mess of it. So basically, they had a house in London, and he was working as an art director, and they sold the house. And my dad worked on farms for about a year and a half to get experience. And during that time, in the early 70s, there was huge house price inflation. So instead of using the money that they'd accrued to buy a nice farm, a dairy farm, with cows and so on, they were kind of their money was eroded by inflation, and they ended up having to buy this 32 acres on a north-facing hill, very bleak pig farm. And pig farming is really, really tough. You have to muck out the pigs before you go to school, and you muck them out when you get back from school, and that was my childhood. It definitely did. But having said all that, my dad was, I think he was quite morose and opinionated and a difficult guy. I don't think he really wanted to be a parent. But one of the things that probably looking back on that was quite good was that he definitely inculcated in us a sense of the fact that the visual was important, and we would talk about advertising, we would talk about art to an extent. I mean, and he was quite erudite and cultured, really. And so I had this kind of, although I grew up in a kind of very rural area, I had this sort of sense of being different and being aware of there being a big world out there. Because my dad had, I'd lived in New York, and he was very much a New York guy, So when we were kind of interacting with culture, we'd be watching TV that was quite good TV. So he'd seek out, I remember him telling me to watch Rosemary's Baby, Polanski's film with Mia Farrow, or Midnight Cowboy, or The Graduate. I saw these films, when I was sort of probably about 10 or 11. And so I was sort of being kind of unwittingly introduced to this kind of wonderful art that kind of impacted on my brother and sister too, the way we saw the world. It was sort of seen as okay to be interested in the visual world.
So when did that translate to, oh, I want to be a photographer? Because I know you went to Plymouth College, but you said you pretty much wasted your first year or almost got kicked out.
Yeah. I mean,
so was it a drive, or did you feel you had to do it? Or
well, I talk about this on the Brian Eno video that we did. I think it's just about Brian Eno talks about this concept of genius rather than genius. So
yes.
I've always sort of followed the path of least resistance, and I try and enjoy whatever it is I'm doing, And I went down there fully kind of expecting just to swim in the sea and go clubbing with my mates and play snooker and do the things I like doing. And when I was down there, I sort of got in with a different group of friends who I'd met on the course, who were much more enthralled to photography and the medium. And they were looking at like Irving Penn and Richard Avedon. We had a book of Richard Avedon's, and I remember my dad sort of saying, "This is exceptional photography," and I looked at the pictures and I liked them, but I got introduced to these guys. I hung out with these guys, and then I'm quite a competitive person. So, okay, let's do this thing. We're all going to kind of try and be photographers. And that's when I started taking it seriously in that second year. So I went down there with one group of friends, and then I kind of went up to London with a different group of friends. I didn't jettison the first group of friends. I'm still friends with them now, but then they weren't really into photography, and
No,
I
so
developed.
naturally you gravitate.
I caught the bug. I just caught the bug. I think it was looking at Irving Penn, Richard Avedon, and Dian Arbus. That's what did it for me. I just kind of wanted to kind of dissect and pick apart and understand why these pictures stayed with me and kind of completely like tattooed onto my memory. You know, I've got this kind of whole kind of encyclopedia of images in my head of every picture Dian Arbus has taken. I can remember every detail photographically, and you find yourself trying to recreate these images that stirred something in you, and so that was the turning point, really. I just sort of something clicked, and as I say, a big part of that is who you're hanging out with.
So, obviously, in retrospect, you look at your life and it looks like everything fell into place as it was supposed to, but life isn't scripted that way, and obviously, it started out very differently. So, did you set yourself benchmarks or goals so you know, okay, I've got to hit that, or I've hit that, I made that. Here's the next one. I hit that. I make that. Or were you say path of least resistance, but you must have had some sort of targets in mind
Yeah,
to
I mean, it's
achieve.
easy to kind of retrofit the narrative, and portray yourself as heroic, uh, and also it's easy to kind of be glib and dismissive of the idea that I was ambitious. I was all those things. I think probably when I was 20, I was more concerned with like meeting a girl that I having a girlfriend and having a
Exactly.
relationship and that sort of all fits in. Yeah, I'm a competitive person, so I kind of uh, don't do things in a half in a. I'm happy to commit and look foolish if I fail. Um, I d- I do think with the benefit of hindsight, when I sort of reflect on what type of child I was, I definitely would have been really pretty irritating to a lot of people because I did have this, which my youngest son has as well. I think this kind of almost deluded sense of self belief, that I, you know, that I was special or something. And I know that that sounds incredibly it's not an attractive quality, but I remember sort of having conversations with friends, and I'd be, yeah, just full of bravado. And then, you know, you kind of talk it, and eventually you end up walking it.
Well,
It's
that's what I was going
strange.
to say, that I think you have to have self-belief. I don't know how that came across to other people really with you, but you have to have self-belief. And like right now, I've come at this career very late, relatively late in my life. We're the same age, and I've only been doing it for a couple of years. I don't have the years of experience. So I'm swinging for fences. I don't have the time to do this gradually. I'm trying things that my younger self would have said, "Oh, no, no, I better not do that." And you have to have that self-belief. And I may fail, but you've got to try. Otherwise, like as I get older, I realize life is very finite and
Mm.
I've got limited time left. So I want to make the best of what I got. And I'm trying things that I wouldn't have normally tried. Now, so I think you and your self-belief, I don't know if it came across as arrogant when with your peers or with your family. How did your family take your pursuits? Were they happy? Was your dad happy that you?
No, I mean my dad. My brother went to the Royal College of Art as a painter, and St Martin's, and won bursaries, and you know is kind of like a savant. I mean, he's incredibly talented. His name is Nicholas Borden, if you want to Google him.
I will
And
look that up.
my sister has won loads of prizes. She's very discreet. She'd be embarrassed about me talking about her, but her name's Frances Borden. She's
I
won
think I
big
saw
prizes.
a post of some of her work. I don't know if it was on your site.
It's possible I might have referred to her and then cut away to a picture, but you know, he said to my sister that her work was shit and that she should be a window dresser. And my brother, he suggested he join the army. And with me, he said you'll never be a great photographer. And he said, in order to big himself up, he said, I've worked with great photographers. You should work in a camera shop. So, and it wasn't a double bluff thing. It was, he genuinely didn't really like us. I think he found that he found himself in a situation that frustrated him. He didn't, for whatever reason, his own childhood or whatever, I don't think he had appropriate parental instincts. And it was only really when my sister kind of was the whistleblower, because she stopped going to school, and she was kind of, in her own quiet way, screaming about the situation, about the kind of dysfunction, such as it was. I mean, it was a kind of benign neglect. You know, I just basically, I got into cycling, and I would go off and hang out. After I'd done my mucking out pigs and my chores and so on, I'd go off and I'd hang out with my friends' family, and I'd go and stay there for the weekend. And I created a world outside of our family. And my, you know, I feel sorry for my dad, because I don't think my children are everything to me. It's nice to be successful as a photographer and everything, but that's the main reason I like doing the channel. Is I like hanging out with Fred, and he enjoys it, and we talk about it every day. And you know, there isn't, when you have children, you finally understand complete and unconditional love. In relationships, love, whether you like it or not, it is conditional. I mean, if you're in a relationship with somebody and their personality changes and they start abusing you, then the love will eventually go. But with your children, you just have this huge reservoir, don't you, of love. And so that's why when I had children and I sort of felt the need to give them hugs and tell them how amazing they are, and affirm them all the time, I reflected on how my dad was with me, and he would just seemed angry and not very happy. And I think a big part of what motivated me as well to be successful was dysfunction. So I'm trying to get his attention the whole time, and that's why I probably did the book on the Holocaust survivors.
I was going to ask you about how much of what you strove to achieve was due to trying to please your father, or trying to get his approval, and if that is the case, when did you stop? When did you say, look, I'm never going to win his approval. I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. I've got to do it for myself.
Over time, you kind of reach that degree of self-awareness, and you realize there's really nothing in it, and you're never going to get his approval. I think probably when I did that book, my first book, The Survivor, Portrait of the Survivors. Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting, because I remember writing a piece. There was a website, and it was called myoldman.org, and it was created by this writer. I think it was Ted Cummings. I can't remember the name of the writer, but it was a really great idea, and it got made into a book. And I'd worked with him, and he asked me if I would take a photograph of my dad. So I took a picture of my dad with his dog, Judy, and I just felt that the photograph was a lie, because it was sort of sentimental. And so I wrote a piece about my dad, and it was one of the first times I've sort of engaged with a different discipline, i.e. writing. And it was so interesting, because it was around the time that the book came out, my Survivor book, and he'd said he's the back third of the book is all biographies of the survivors that I'd photographed, and that's the bit I had the least to do with. And I showed it to my dad and gave him a copy, and he said the most interesting thing about it is the biographies. You know, he just dismissive of the photography and everything. And then shortly after that, I got an email, or I actually got a direct message from Twitter from Alain de Botton, and who's a sort of a popular intellectual, sort of a philosopher. He's written lots of books about philosophy, and he started the School of Life, which is a YouTube channel that has millions of subscribers and is all about how to live a meaningful life. So somebody of great kind of who's considers things and is very erudite and a deep person. And he messaged me on Twitter, and he said I just wanted to let you know I found your book incredibly moving. It's a masterpiece. And I just contrasted what he said with what my dad had said, and I just thought, well, and then strangely enough, I'd written this piece. The reason I brought that up is I wrote the piece, and so I was done with my dad. I just thought, you know, I'm getting affirmation from strangers, you know, but my own father can't find it. He can't even say that they're good pictures or that they did a nice. I think he said the publishers did a nice job, which they did. But then,
still not you. He can't bring himself to
absolutely.
compliment you.
And so eventually, the piece of prose that I'd written about my dad was published on this website. And my brother I felt obliged to tweet it, and my brother saw this bit of prose, and it was very critical of my dad, incredibly critical. And I've written about him also for my book on single parent dads, about how he would sort of sit stiff and agitated on the sofa, turning the volume up whilst his grandchildren played around him, you know, grinding his teeth and being angry and stuff like that. And I didn't pull any punches. And I remember I was doing a job, and my dad phoned me, and by that stage I was done with seeking his approval. And he said, I saw it was him, and so I thought, gosh, maybe he's seen it. And then he said, I saw what you wrote. And I said, oh yeah. And he said, I never knew you were such a good writer. So after I'd kind of checked out and had closure, around probably 2000, and I was well into my 40s. After I'd given up seeking his approval, he paid me a compliment, which meant a lot, actually, and it's given me a lot of confidence, actually, in terms of writing generally. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, it sounds like he was a very unhappy man. You said he had a midlife crisis, which caused the move to the pig farm. So it just sounds like he was always in search of something. He never quite found it, and took his unhappiness out on the people around him.
Yeah, I mean I had a friend who died of esophageal cancer when he was 52, and I've had other friends die and so on, and having children, and I think when you get older you get more soulful, but it didn't really happen. I mean, towards the end of his life, he had, as he would say, he had prostate cancer, but he would say, I'm going to die with it rather than of it. And they gave him some female hormones, because that's how they slow down, because testosterone sort of pushes the cancer on.
Okay.
And it sort of feminized him. And so towards the end of his life, he did soften a little bit, but he couldn't find just the joy. He liked conflict and tension. He would just sit and watch Fox News, and sort of, even though he was kind of from he professed to be a liberal at heart, he would sit and watch Fox News and sort of just enjoy getting angry about things,
Well, it's funny. I guess our parents shape everybody around us, shapes who we are. So I wonder, would you be the person you are today were it not for him being the way he was?
Absolutely. I don't regret anything. I mean, I do think having that kind of freedom that I had when I was a child, because we were just left, when I got my results at school, my parents weren't really interested, or concerned. They weren't really involved in, if you want to go to study photography, fine. You know, my friend who I went down to Plymouth with, his name was Mark, and he's the guy that died of esophageal cancer. His family were very traditional, and they frankly were farmers, and they regarded him doing photography as evidence of his being gay or something like that. You know, it was they're very, very,
Because
you
anything
know,
artistic, yeah.
yeah, they just regarded it as kind of extremely questionable choice. And in the end, he was a really talented guy, a very creative guy. But in the end, it meant that he wasn't able to fully commit, and he ended up being a builder in the end. Even though he was talented, he was a talented photographer. And when I did that book, the Survivor book, I gave him a copy of the book, and I wrote in it, I wouldn't have been a photographer if I hadn't met you, you know.
Now, I want to talk about your success because you've said in the past it doesn't come from a big break. It comes from a sort of a gradual series of experiences.
Mm.
Now, I'm not misquoting you, am I? I'm
No,
pretty sure
no,
that's something you
I'd say
said.
that's true. It's
And
incremental,
but
isn't it?
incremental, and you learn from your failures. That's everyone knows that you can learn from failures. But one thing you said is that one of those small successes was getting a picture in the National Portrait Gallery. And I'm thinking, that's not a small success. That sounds like a very big success to me. How do you reconcile that?
I think probably. Well, I mean, I put that all down to a guy called Terence Pepper, who was the curator of photography at the National Portrait Gallery. I mean, over time, I would get a few pictures in there, but no man is an island. You know, I basically, managed to cultivate some goodwill from Terence. He liked me, and he liked what I did. He saw value in it, and he sort of when I sort of left my agency, I had boxes and boxes and boxes of prints because we were all going digital, and these prints were kind of archaic, kind of relics, artifacts. And I was just thinking, well, maybe I could just give them to the National Portrait Gallery. They can put them in a skip if they want. And so I invited him and his colleague Claire, still works at the National Portrait Gallery. Terence is retired now, round to my house, and they went through these boxes, and he just picked out the images that he liked, and then I said, well, you can have them, and he said, no, we'd like you to get new prints made for the permanent collection. So yeah, I've got over 100 pictures in the archive.
That sounds like a staggering feat. Is it, even by today's standards, has it become harder to get in there? I don't know the
I mean, they're not. It's a huge kind of archive. So at any given time, there might be one picture of mine that is being currently shown, or there might be no pictures being shown. They're just basically in that institution. So if they do a sort of a kind of themed exhibition about female musicians, then they might sort of pull out my picture of the Spice Girls or whatever. But they're all on the website, and it's very, very. I'm very proud of that, because in the realm of celebrity portrait photography, what you're hoping to do is get something definitive, and in a way, a good barometer of whether you've achieved that aim is whether they end up in sort of collections like that, which aren't really about the photographer; they're about the definitive picture of whoever it happens to be.
Okay, yeah, and I want to get back to that in more depth, but I do want to talk about your personal style as well, because you mentioned your inspirations: Richard Avedon, Diane Arbus, Irving Penn. When did you decide, or when did you realize, I've got my own style, and that maybe someone will look at my work and say, that's a Harry Borden, I can recognize that? Was there one point?
There wasn't. I can think of two separate things off the very early things at the. It's interesting because I had an exhibition, and a woman who I'd been at college with came along, and sort of 30 years after we'd been at college, to the opening, and I hadn't seen her since we were at college. And I was just saying that, I got lucky, and it basically, I just turned up and I worked very hard. And, when I was at college, we were all just floundering around, all just doing our best and everything. And she corrected me. She sort of said, no, I remember, you were different. Your work was a bit different. And I think, I'm not necessarily endorsing that, but it gave me pause to reflect. And I do think, I can remember my parents, for my birthday, they bought me this. I was like 14 or something, and I bought this. They got me this Vivitar zoom lens, 70 to 210, and it was quite slow. It was like f4.5 or something like that. And I remember down in the fields below our house, there was they were making straw, and they were harvesting the corn and making straw bales. And I was sort of involved, I'd help and stuff. And the combine harvester was sort of cutting the straw, the corn down in order to facilitate this. And I went down there to try out this new lens, and I realized I was instinctually framing the pictures in the camera, and I just had a very, very strong feeling graphically about what looked right to me. So it was very, very instinctual. And when the pictures came back, because you'd send them off back then, and they'd come back in 2 weeks, I was really delighted with the results. And I thought, they gave me a bit of confidence. And I thought, and it seems much easier when you've got a longer lens. I was playing, if you've got a slightly telephoto lens, and a zoom as well, you can kind of tightly crop. But that sort of happened. And then when I was at college and I got into Irving Penn and Richard Avedon, particularly Avedon, and also maybe a bit David Bailey, who copied Avedon, sort of very stark white background, and then at one hard light on your subject, like Bailey's pictures of the Krays or Mick Jagger, or his signature style, really, the Beatles. I just systematically started to photograph everybody that would sit for me, or medium format, with that lighting. And I just really instinctually framed things in a way that I felt had a graphic tension. It was very instinctive. And I remember I took one picture. I was looking at it the other day. It's more than 40 years old, of the caretaker, and it's still a crackerjack picture. It's got a real kind of power to it. And so I think I realized that there is some kind of innate visual language that it's a bit like learning. I'm not very good at languages, but some people just can pick up languages very, very easily. Their brain is wired in that way. And I think possibly maybe because I'm dyslexic, I think there's a lot of dyslexic photographers, and the shortcomings that they have that apply to the way their brain is wired, which give them dyslexia, are probably in some respects advantageous in making
maybe
sense.
They make up for it visually. Whatever they lack.
Definitely. I mean, I was never diagnosed as dyslexic, but my daughter, who's in fact done a project with her, she's drawing, and she's a very creative and talented person. But when she was at school, she was really struggling, and then she's now works for Meta, and she basically in her third year at uni, she suddenly started flying, and then she had a test, and they found she was severely dyslexic. And I think she didn't get it from her mother. I'm sure I was dyslexic, but very high functioning dyslexic. And I think it means that I sort of have a very strong opinion about how things should be arranged graphically within a frame. So it's very natural. It's second nature. It doesn't feel like work. It's just conforming to my own very strongly held views about how things should be. I mean, when I was a kid, so I'll just quickly say this because I just suddenly remember it, and I just find it's no wonder. I was going to say about my friends' parents thinking they were gay. I'm sure my dad thought I was gay, because I would suggest that we have a room tidying competition when I was about sort of 10. And I would sort of arrange everything in my room. And it was a bit like the world of interiors. I would sort of put a table in the middle of the room with a chessboard all set up, and then arrange things. And I was looking back, that was probably evidence that I sort of had an obsessive need to arrange things.
You were a set designer. You were creating
Absolutely,
sets.
absolutely. It was but it was very instinctual.
So now you said that you work quickly, or you've developed. So is that when you arrive on a scene? Because I did want to get into how you do approach your shoots. But so you arrive on a scene and you can sort of very quickly assess. Obviously, you can assess the light, the natural light, if you're shooting natural light, and whatever props or things might be around you can use for that graphical thing. Is that how you mean you can work quickly?
Yeah, I mean the speed comes from the fact that I just have there's only one way of doing it, and it's basically a visual language. I speak a visual language. I think it's the kind of like what feels right. It's like none of my pictures anywhere really, unless someone else has cropped them, are cropped. They're all just cropped in the camera, because when I actually took them, I was just adhering to the kind of voice in my head telling me to frame it that way, and that means that I don't have any indecision, and indecision is what takes time, faffing around, trying
But
different things.
that's
I can do a dozen different things because I
but
can
that
sort of do
sounds
them.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, it sounds like it's more of a mathematical equation rather than a creative experimentation. So
Yeah,
you don't allow room for that experimentation. It's
well,
like, no, it's going to be this way.
the interesting thing is that it's more like improvising in jazz. So
Mm.
you can basically you understand the core
Uh,
scale. Trying to make a sort of clumsy analogy with music. I mean, I
no,
was
no,
learning
makes
to play the
sense.
piano, but you understand the framework, and then as soon as you understand that, then you can start breaking the rules and having fun. It's very, as I say, it's the more as I get older, I'm more sort of comfortable in my skin. I'm more confident about it, about doing this, and sort of I've reflected and analyzed my approach, and that's what I've realized is that I don't like having any preconceived ideas. It's not formulaic at all, actually. It's sort of just responding to the environment. But there's a consistency and a formula in the way that I respond to the environment. But what I do is I go into a situation and I look for something that has something strange about it, something that appeals to me on a visceral level, a strange light or some marking or something that has attention, and I put someone into that space, and then I record the relationship we have.
One of I think the best examples that I can remember, and I love Stephen Merchant, and I love that picture of yours where I can't remember the building, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
sort of this
yeah,
stone structure, and there's this crevice, and you just like wedge him in there, and it's like this very
yeah.
awkward gangly man standing in this crack in a wall, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that's a good example, because there's no way I didn't do a recce. I had no idea that wall was there until I arrived at the school.
Mm,
I had to do the shoot in Clifton, which is a place that I've never done a shoot before. It's basically he lives in, I think he lives in Bristol, and the posh part
yes.
of Bristol is called Clifton. And I remembered that there was a private school called Clifton that's very, very highly regarded. So I phoned up the school and asked if I could do the shoot there, because I had to do it near where he lived. And I also knew that there would be lots of interesting things that would present themselves on the day. And it doesn't matter where I'd much rather just do it someplace I've never been before. I don't need to have certainty or the security of having worked in a particular studio. I like sort of improvising on the day, because it's boring just doing the same thing every time.
So you don't do a reconnaissance and say, okay,
Oh
like a
no.
scout before that. See, that to me would be, I want
I
to
mean, if I
know.
do, yeah, if I'm doing an I mean, I haven't done much advertising lately, but when I was doing a lot of advertising shoots, they would pay you to go and recce a location, and you know, everyone around you is worried and concerned that you're going to be able to get a great picture of Gordon Ramsay or whoever it happens to be. but I know it only takes 1/25th of a second to get a good picture. I know that sounds glib, but it's much better to kind of be to fly by the seat of your pants, and if providing you can retain some degree of being relaxed, and that's when the creative stuff happens. And I don't really care about looking foolish. I just improvise. I mean, Stephen Merchant probably didn't. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I'm not really concerned with whether he wanted to go into that space in between the buildings, but a lot of it is having the strength of your convictions and kind of being cajoling people.
I mean, had you gone on a reconnaissance beforehand, you could have walked past that area and not even thought, "Oh yeah, that's the perfect shape. That gap is Stephen Merchant shaped. I'm going to stick
Yeah,
him in there." You wouldn't have thought that.
I think on the day I was so I shot him in this big kind of like room that had loads of chairs. So there's some pictures of him.
Oh
that are
yes,
quite
yes. Where
fun.
he's sitting on the stack of
Yeah,
chairs.
yeah, because he's about 6'7", and so I used that as a studio. And I can't remember whether I probably did have a little walk around and think, oh, that's an interesting space. But I mean, it would have been just on the day, because that it's foolish to completely, because sometimes there isn't anything, so you do want to know where the good things are, and then you can just utilize the small amount of time that you have with these people.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sometimes because I like to take my time. Part of my style is to get to know this person so I can draw out their personal story. I've got them for a sliver of their life, and I've got to try and capture as much of their life as I can. At least that's how I see it. Now, with a celebrity, you've got, I don't know, it could be 5 minutes. How do you build that rapport in such a short time? Can you build a rapport in such a short time? I know you've had experiences where they give you nothing and you've got to make the best of it, and sometimes it works to your advantage. But how do you do
I
that?
think I think I think it probably it does come down to being of interest. I mean, if you're kind of a bit different, and I sort of I'm the sort of person that I can meet someone, and I'll be having, like, I had a swim this morning, and I'll go and have a sauna afterwards, and then I'll end up talking to I like people. I like asking them questions and chatting, and it often makes you feel good connecting with somebody. And so I'm very comfortable to not have, as I said, appropriate boundaries. So I'll literally talk about anything with anyone. And you've got to kind of bowl into a situation and have that. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm charismatic or anything. That's in the eye of the beholder. But I definitely think I'm not threatening, but probably come across as this weird bald guy, sort of quite intriguing. They've been sort of, if people are nervous, I mean, the times when I've got it wrong, I still get something, but I remember photographing Adrien Brody, who was in The
Oh
Pianist,
yes, yeah.
who I really, really like. I mean, I love The Pianist, and he's a brilliant actor. And I just made the mistake of reading about him, and I learned that he was into hip hop. And because I work for the NME, I've been to photograph the Wu-Tang Clan or whatever, and I tried to sort of. I'm not really that into hip hop. I mean, I photographed Ice-T, and like anyone, I'm sort of aware of the artists and so on, and it's an interesting phenomenon, and how it was kind of quite a radical thing when I was starting, and now it's kind of completely mainstream. But I tried to sort of talk about something that I wasn't really feeling it. I was just sort of phoning it in and trying to establish a
Try to
rapport.
leverage that interest. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would have been better off. I mean, I got on fine with him, but I just remember, if I ever try and fake it, it's just, I just try and be authentic. I mean, it's such an overused expression, but if you overthink things, then you kind of, I mean, I think that's why the YouTube channel works well, because people can see that Fred and I mean, sometimes I really annoy Fred, and he edits out the bits where I'm getting on his nerves.
You should show those. You should show the bloopers. I want to
No, he
see
would
that.
he would never allow that. But basically, I think I have a genuine affection for him naturally enough, and we have a good rapport, and that's you just want to be. You just when you go and photograph somebody, you want to be a guy. You don't want to be somebody that's. I mean, I talk about this actually. We just done a video about the Smiths. And I was talking about photographing Johnny Marr, and it was years ago, and I don't know if you know the Smiths and Johnny Marr's a brilliant guitarist, a brilliant musician, and the Smiths were really important to me when I was a kid. I really loved their music, and I sort of said to Johnny Marr, I was in the hotel room with him on my own. I refused to put the lights on because I wanted to use available light coming in through, and it was quite tense already. And then I told him, how much his music meant to me and everything, and it was just such a terrible thing to do because it sort of changed the whole dynamic. And someone like that hears that all the time, and so it just basically means it's really unprofessional. So I mean, it's definitely say that, but say it after you've done the shoot. And then it was like a bomb going off in 2009. And as I say, up until that point, everything had gone according to plan. And then suddenly it was like a train wreck.